What's up, YouTube? Zero here, and today I have an absolutely phenomenal Garchomp and Altaria deck in Pokemon TCG Pocket. In this video, I'll go over the deck build that you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. I'll talk about each of these cards individually, and I'll also talk about why this deck is absolutely phenomenal and why you should be checking it out. Before I get into it, I do want to say, as always, if you do enjoy this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more Pokemon TCG content. I do a bunch of other video games, so feel free to check those out as well. Without further ado, time to talk about this Garchomp and Altaria deck. Now, this deck is the first deck I'm coming out with the release of the Secluded Springs pack. The Altaria card that you're seeing on the left-hand side was released with that Secluded Springs pack. And it is a very interesting card. It can actually fit into a lot of decks. You can see on the left-hand side of the screen that for 2 colorless energy, it can attack. However, you are going to want to have multiple energies on it that I'm going to talk about in a second. Garchomp has always been a phenomenal card. It is a card that's very solid for only 2 energy, of course, a water and a fighting, and this deck does run both water and fighting energy because Garchomp requires it, but it deals a decent amount of damage for just 2 energy, and when paired with Cynthia, it is an absolutely force to be reckoned with. It is a phenomenal card. I love Garchomp, one of my favorite Pokemon, so of course I always love coming out with Garchomp decks and ways to put Garchomp back into the spotlight because this is a phenomenal pairing. Now, I know some people, they don't like the randomness of running multiple energies. Of course, you can sometimes brick on energies, and that can sometimes be frustrating. So I know there are players out there who don't like running multiple energies. What's nice though is that Garchomp only requires 1 of each, and Altaria does not require 1 of each. It will be nice to get 1 of each on Altaria, and you'll see that in a second when I talk about Altaria, but it's not required. For 2 colorless energy, you can attack. But let's talk about Altaria to start because it is the new card. If you've been around a while, you probably already know about Garchomp, so let's talk about Altaria. Altaria, for 2 colorless energy, has Dragon Arcana. Now, Dragon Arcana deals 40 damage, however, it's 40 plus damage. If this Pokemon has 2 or more different types of energy attached, this attack does 60 more damage. So let's break that down for a second. Within this deck, because I am running 2 different energies, if you have 2 water energy equipped on Altaria, it deals 40 damage. If you have 2 fighting energy equipped on Altaria, it deals 40 damage. However, if you have 1 water energy and 1 fighting energy, Altaria deals 100 damage because it's 40 plus. All you need is 1 of each of these energies, and you can deal 100 damage for Altaria. That's pretty awesome. And it combines very well with Garchomp because Garchomp is running multiple energies. What's great about this combination is, 1, this is a multi-energy deck, so Altaria has the capability of having multi-energies equipped on it. On top of that, if you are bricking on a certain energy, let's just say you're only getting water type energies, well, Altaria can still attack. Now, it's not going to be for a lot, but you can have Altaria in that active slot attacking for 40 damage while you have your Garchomp on the bench kind of waiting for that next energy or that fighting type energy. It's great, Altaria, when you can attack for 100. However, if you are bricking, at least you're still attacking. Previous Garchomp decks, where if you had Garchomp paired with a certain Pokemon that may have required either water or fighting type energy, if you're bricking on the energy required, you're bricking for all your damage. Altaria, at least you can utilize any energy that you get to attack for 40. So if you're bricking on one or the other energy, you are still attacking for 40 energy, which is doing some damage. If you're facing an Oricorio like I am, 2 hits and that Oricorio's done. If you're facing lesser Pokemon, you can still take them out, so you don't have to worry completely about bricking on a certain type of energy. Altaria has 120 HP, so they're not going to be able to take you out insanely quickly while you're trying to find that other energy for Garchomp on the bench. Now, Garchomp is still going to be your damage dealer, especially when paired with Cynthia, but Altaria is really going to provide a lot of great assistance for Garchomp while you're trying to grind for those 2 different energies for Garchomp and while you're waiting on getting Cynthia so you can deal 150 damage. And like I mentioned earlier, Altaria is going to be found in the Secluded Springs packs that just released. Of course, you need Swablu. Its evolutionary stage, its basic stage for Altaria, it's going to be found in the Secluded Springs pack as well. And for 1 colorless energy, Peck for 20 damage. You have to be very careful with Swablu though, because it does only have 50 HP, so it is a little bit less than you'd like in that active slot, but you need it for Altaria. Next, let's talk about the other Pokemon in this deck, Garchomp. Garchomp is a phenomenal Pokemon. It's been out since the Space-Time Smackdown packs released, and it is found specifically in the Palkia packs of those Space-Time Smackdown packs. However, Garchomp is a phenomenal card. It has so much going for it. First, it has a move I mentioned earlier for 1 water and 1 fighting is Dragon Claw for 100 damage. So that's pretty similar to Altaria. In terms of Altaria, if you have 1 water and 1 fighting, it also deals 100 damage. So both of these Pokemon can deal 100 damage. However, I'll talk about in a second, Cynthia, which turbocharges Garchomp so it can deal more damage. But again, not a lot of energy. As long as you're not bricking on one or the other energy, you can set up both Garchomp and Altaria pretty quickly in terms of energy, and you're dealing 100 damage, which is phenomenal. Garchomp also has an ability, Reckless Shearing. You must discard a card from your hand in order to use this ability. However, once during your turn, you may draw a card. So if you're at some point in the game in which you have a card in your hand that you don't need, and you're looking for a specific card, whether it's Cyrus, maybe it's Cynthia, maybe it's Sabrina, whatever card you're looking for, you can sacrifice a card in your hand. Maybe you don't need a Pokeball, maybe you don't need one of your rare candies. Whatever card you may not need, you can sacrifice that in your hand to draw a card to potentially get the card you need. That can absolutely turn the tide of battle, and it's a phenomenal ability to have, because there are points in the game where you may have a card in your hand that you don't need. So that's a pretty nice ability to have, especially because you can draw a card and maybe get to a card that you need. So that's a phenomenal ability. I do love Garchomp's ability. Now, of course, you need the basic, you need Gibble. There are multiple Gibbles in this game. I have the one from the Space-Time Smackdown Palkia packs. For 1 colorless energy, Gnaw deals 20 damage. Now, some of you may notice I do not have Gabite in this deck, which is the stage 1 of this evolutionary line. That's because I have Rare Candy. Rare Candy, for those of you who don't know, allow you to skip the stage 1 and go right into your stage 2 evolution. So in terms of this deck, as long as Gibble has been on the playing field for at least 1 turn and you have a Rare Candy in Garchomp in your hand, you can utilize Rare Candy to evolve Gibble right into Garchomp, skipping the stage 1, which is Gabite in this evolutionary line. So it's a really phenomenal card. It can save you a turn as long as you have Rare Candy and Garchomp in your hand, so it's a really nice card to have. Rare Candy can be found in the Celestial Guardians packs. Next, a couple of cards that are in almost every deck. Pokeball allows you to draw a basic Pokemon from your deck to your hand, and Professor's Research, you get to draw 2 cards. Next, my supporter cards. Definitely need these other supporter cards in this deck. Let's talk about Cynthia, which is going to be the most important one for this deck. Pairs really nicely with Garchomp. Cynthia is also going to be found in those Space-Time Smackdown Palkia packs. So during this turn that you utilize Cynthia, attacks used by your Garchomp deal 50 plus damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So you take a move that's 100 damage and you now deal 150 damage. That is absolutely phenomenal and can KO a lot of very powerful Pokemon in this game. There are a lot of powerful Pokemon, EX Pokemon, that have 120, 130, or even 140 or 150 HP, and you can one-hit KO all of them. Of course, as long as they don't have a giant cape. But Giratina has 150 HP. Darkrai EX has 140 HP. A lot of great Pokemon have 140 or 150 HP. Cynthia is going to allow you to one-hit KO them. So Cynthia, 2 of them, is absolutely needed for this deck. Cynthia is going to be a great pairing for Garchomp, absolutely needed. Now I have 2 Sabrinas and 2 Cyruses. However, you could maybe forego one of each of these if you want to throw in a Pokemon Communication. I have toyed with the idea of throwing Pokemon Communication into this deck to make sure I can get the cards I need a little bit easier. I haven't yet, but that's something I may look into, and if I throw 2 Pokemon Communications in this deck, I would probably put them in for 1 Sabrina and 1 Cyrus. If I do decide to only put 1 Pokemon Communication in this deck, I would sacrifice the Cyrus. One of the Cyruses anyway. But I definitely think you need at least 1 Sabrina and 1 Cyrus. Sabrina is phenomenal. It can slow your opponents down. It can force opponents out of the active slot that you don't want to deal with. Y'all have already, who have watched my videos before, know I love Sabrina, one of my favorite cards. You switch out your opponent's active Pokemon to the bench. Your opponent does get to choose the new active Pokemon. However, it can really allow you a lot of strategic play when using Sabrina. So I love Sabrina. It's a great card. Can force a Pokemon on the bench that has a high retreat cost to that active slot. It can force a Pokemon on the bench that has no energy attached to it to the active slot. Or it can force a Pokemon to the active slot that your opponent doesn't want you attacking that you're going to attack. So it's a phenomenal card, Sabrina. Really great for a lot of different decks, but it's phenomenal for this deck. And Sabrina can be found in the Genetic Apex Charizard packs. Next, of course, Cyrus, another great card. When your Pokemon are only dealing 100 damage, you could leave yourself open to your opponent retreating their EX cards to the bench so you don't KO them on a second turn. Cyrus, you switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon that has damage on it to the active slot. So Cyrus is going to be phenomenal, so your opponent can't hide those weakened Pokemon on their bench and you can KO them. I love Cyrus for this deck. As I mentioned earlier, you deal 100 damage. A lot of powerful Pokemon aren't one-hit KO'd. A lot of EX Pokemon aren't one-hit KO'd by 100 damage. So you can utilize Cyrus if your opponent tries to retreat those Pokemon. So Cyrus is great. Also going to be found in the Space-Time Smackdown Palkia pack. So a lot of great cards in this deck are going to be found in those Space-Time Smackdown Palkia packs. It was a really great pack that came out that provided the game with a lot of great cards. This is a phenomenal deck, and Altaria pairs really well with Garchomp. This is a nice dragon deck, especially if you're a dragon type trainer like I am. One of my favorite types next to Ghost. Ghost is my favorite type. Dragon type is my second favorite type. And this is a phenomenal deck. Really utilizes water and fighting energy phenomenally. Altaria can deal damage regardless of the energy you're equipping on it. Of course, you prefer one of each type of energy so you can deal that 100 damage. However, if you do get only one of a certain energy, whether it's one water, you're constantly getting water, or constantly getting fighting, at least you can attack with Altaria. That's the beauty of having Altaria in Garchomp, is even if you are bricking on a certain type of energy, you can attack with Altaria. You don't have to sit there and just take damage after damage after damage without attacking. You can at least attack with Altaria. So at the end of the day, if your opponent is bricking on maybe an evolution, you can see my opponent in this clip has a Poliwag, if they are bricking on, say, their Poliwrath, I can still hit them for 40 damage while they're not evolving, and I'm not just sitting there letting them build up cards and potentially their evolution. So that's what's nice about the pairing of these two. If you are bricking on a certain energy, you don't have to worry about it too much because you can still deal damage. Garchomp is still going to be the major damage dealer because we have Cynthia in this deck. Cynthia plus Garchomp is 150 damage. You're going to deal a lot of damage and take out a lot of Pokemon one-hit KO when you have Garchomp plus Cynthia, but at least you have the opportunity to deal 100 damage with both Pokemon and then 40 with Altaria if you are bricking on a certain energy. But this combination is phenomenal. Great Dragon-type deck. I absolutely love it. And it's, of course, my first new deck of the Secluded Springs pack with Altaria in this deck. Let me know what you think of this deck in the comments section. I know a lot of people don't like running two energies because you do have the fear of bricking on multi or a certain type of energy. Let me know what you think of running multi-energy decks. Are you a fan or are you not a fan? I like running the risk, especially because I love Garchomp. Favorite Pokemon, or one of them, one of my favorite Pokemon. So I love building decks with Garchomp. I've defeated a lot of great decks. I've defeated a Celebi deck. I've defeated a Giratina deck with this deck. It is a phenomenal deck, especially being able to deal that 150 damage can really put you in a good spot against opponents. Let me know what changes you'd make in this deck to make it even better. I want to know in the comments section. As I mentioned earlier, I've toyed with the idea of putting Pokemon Communication in this deck. It could be a nice card to have so you can guarantee getting that Garchomp or that Altaria if you do need an evolution. I know there have been certain games where I've bricked on getting my evolutions. Sometimes that's just the luck of the draw. I have 6 cards left in my deck and all 4 of them are my evolutions. 2 Altarias and 2 Garchomps left, despite the fact that I have 6 cards left in the deck. Sometimes that's just the luck of the draw. Most of the time, though, I am pulling those cards that I need. However, without Pokemon Communication, I'm not guaranteeing myself as much. So would you put a Pokemon Communication in this deck? I'm interested to hear your thoughts in the comments section. Let's talk anything Pokemon TCG in the comment section. If there's a specific Pokemon you'd like to see a deck of, let me know in the comment section and I'll get it done. I'll build a deck around whatever Pokemon you want to see a deck of. Doesn't matter the Pokemon. I've experimented with a Rhyperior deck recently. And needless to say, it didn't turn out well, but I'm still experimenting with different decks so I can have fun and y'all can have fun with new Pokemon, different Pokemon decks that you don't always see in the meta. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and again, if you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more Pokemon TCG content. Until next time, peace.